Hey there, and welcome to Reviews in Review, Bayonetta 3, where we take some video game reviews off Metacritic and we review those reviews. The idea was suggested to me by a mate, and yeah, I thought it was a good idea as a way to sort of explore how reviews work. My name is Joe Gilroy. I'm a video game critic of 15 years, and why don't we jump in? I'll take you through the process really quick. So the idea is I've taken 6 reviews off Metacritic for this game, Bayonetta 3. The embargo lifted 48 hours ago. I've taken 6 reviews, 2 top reviews, 2 middle ground reviews, and 2 low reviews. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of explore those reviews and take them apart a bit and try to get to the bottom of how those reviews illuminate the reader, basically. Now, to select each review to select the reviews from each category, what I did was I got a random number generator and I punched in the number of top reviews, the number of medium reviews or middling reviews, and the number of low reviews, and I basically used that to determine which reviews I would look at. So now there were 7 top reviews, 100s, 10 out of 10s basically on Metacritic, and a score of 100 doesn't mean the game is perfect, as we'll explore, but it does mean that it is basically one of the best games that you can play. And yeah, there were 7 of these across the 72 total reviews on Metacritic, so that's about 10%, just below 10%. Now the first one that came up was the first number pulled by my RNG was a Brazilian site, The Enemy, written by Helena Nogueira. And I didn't want to do her or the site the disservice of attempting to Google Translate the review and going at it from that perspective. It seemed like we might arrive at the wrong location. Based on the excerpt on Metacritic, though, Helena appeared to enjoy the empowerment delivered by Bayonetta, Viola, and Jean. However you say that, as juxtaposed against the deliberate use of the male gaze. So, that's cool. And so we move on instead to The Guardian, where Tom Regan was the writer. Let's have a look at their excerpt on Metacritic. Where many Western games yearn to be seen as the height of sophistication, craving the critical kudos of an HBO drama, Bayonetta 3 stands defiant in its absurdity. Like its predecessors, this is destined to go down as a cult classic, a dizzying dance of demon-dicing delight. Its crude, whiplash-inducing narrative means it certainly won't be for everyone, but the best things in life rarely are. Typically what Metacritic does is it pulls a paragraph from right at the end, from the conclusion. Not always the final paragraph, and what Metacritic grabs can be up for grabs, really, unless you specifically ask them to use something. I've worked on a Metacritic listed site. I was the editor on a Metacritic listed site, and I've written Metacritic listed reviews a bunch. I have never once asked for a specific paragraph to be used, but I have previously asked them to change to a different paragraph because I felt the chosen paragraph was not correctly highlighting my feelings about the game. And they'll do it. You email them, and they're usually pretty quick about that stuff. They're good to work with from that perspective. So Tom, they gave it a 5 out of 5, and they describe the game as a horny anime directed by Christopher Nolan. in the text. I never really felt like they explained what that meant. I liked the review overall, but that specific line was kind of lost on me, and it was their pull quote. It was the Guardian's chosen pull quote, but I think it's eye-catching. It just never really pans out in the text of the article. So I was left kind of confused by that. There is a sentence that I particularly liked in it. Set pieces swerve from disintegrating flying demons with a furry demon cat to suggestively riding a Godzilla-sized Gamora across ever-shifting interdimensional skyscrapers. That feels like a wild ride all on its own. That one little sentence encapsulates the essence, I think, of what Bayonetta 3 is probably trying to go for. I guess I should explain. I have not played any of the Bayonettas. That's actually why I chose this one to go with. I wanted to get an idea of the game based purely off the reviews, and yeah, I didn't play Bayonetta 1. I didn't play Bayonetta 2, and yeah, I won't play Bayonetta 3. It's just not going to happen. So I'm not particularly interested in the series. I don't have a dog in this fight or anything like that, and I don't necessarily get all of the references that people make in these reviews. I'm sort of piecing it together as best I can. For example, in this chosen sentence, Gamora is referencing a demon, a throwback to Bayonetta 2. I don't know it in that context. I know it's a hit TV show and a Doom City in the Bible, but I didn't have any point of reference for it as a demon. So yeah, that's an interesting one that you run into sometimes. You know, you think you write it from the perspective of someone writing for an audience you assume are probably Bayonetta fans who will understand what you're talking about, but that's not always the case. Anyway, another sentence in the mix. As the Umbran Witch's story reaches its chaotic climax, all the nonsensical nattering about alpha versus homunculi and singularities starts to grate. That's half a sentence anyway. The other half says the action drags you along, kicking and screaming despite this. To me, it doesn't read like something that belongs in a 5-star review, because I guess you don't use nonsensical nattering, alliterative niceties aside. They're two quite negative words, which when combined, there's like a wave effect where they don't just add to what they double, right? Like there's resonance there between those words, so it really amplifies the use of that word, those two words, to result in nonsensical nattering. To me, sounds like quite heavy-duty criticism. But what Regan here is trying to do is highlight that it doesn't matter that the story is nonsensical, that the action is so good that it sort of overwhelms that aspect of it. It's good beyond the story's falterings. I just think that particular wording choice is maybe not ideal. And hey, this is a review of reviews, so if you don't agree with me, Tom, I implore you to review this review of your review. Let's get real weird with it. Anyway, as the grabbed quote said, Regan believes it's not for everyone, but that's fine, right? And it is, right? And I think it's important, especially with a masthead like The Guardian, to make sure you're not trying to lay this out as a game for everyone. Some people will immediately bounce off Bayonetta. It's very anime. It's very the action is of a particular type. It doesn't appeal to literally, it doesn't have wide appeal. It's a cult classic, as Tom says, you know. Overall, I think this is a well-written review. It's very quick. It's quite punchy. There's just one particular word choice I don't agree with. Chris Carter wrote our second, or third technically, top review, and they wrote it for Destructoid. Carter reviewed Bayonetta 2 for Destructoid as well, and they tend that one too. They're definitely fans of Bayonetta. Their pull quote is, "When playing Bayonetta 3, much to my delight, I had no clue what was going to happen next at all times." This review is effusive. It's glowing, absolutely glowing. Carter clearly adores this series and is very happy with what Bayonetta 3 turned out to be. Their chief complaint is that they wish there was more game. I think it's an attitude best evidenced in this sentence fragment. There's a lot of tension to the story, as well as last-minute, catastrophic saves that will make you smile. Catastrophic is a word that essentially it's a positive spin on the concept of Deus Ex Machina, which is generally a not a good thing. Usually, the concept of Deus Ex Machina is derided in storytelling. You don't want that sort of surprise they got out of it at the last second. A meteor comes crashing down, or someone shows up who couldn't have been there, type thing. But when you're trying to spin it in a good way, you call it catastrophic, or you call it catastrophe, which is fine, right? Like, it's not always. The Deus Ex Machina isn't actually always a bad thing. But when you call it a Deus Ex Machina, what you do is you cement in the reader's mind that it is a cop-out of some sort, right? So finding another word for it is a great idea, and I think they did a good job. Assuming, and I think it's as I said, evidenced by the text, assuming that they wanted to highlight how good this game is. My favorite sentence from the review is, summoning a frog to dance and cause an acid rainfall and directing the course of a train with tank turrets on the side of it is just as fun to control. I don't know if the frog is controlling the train here, but yeah, the mental image that it conjures up is very joyful to me. I like the idea of a frog driving a train. I don't know what it is, but it seems cool. It ends with a score of 10, which I think makes a lot of sense. That is actually rendered out by the text to me of this review. It reads like a 10. More explicit praise. The only real oddity is the score system calls it flawless. It gives the score 10 and then says flawless, and then an explanation of what flawless means, which begins with 10s aren't perfect, since nothing is. But that seems like a direct contradiction to the word flawless to me, which I know is pedantry, but you don't get to be doing a review over a review if you're not something of a pedant. And hey, everyone loves semantics, right? Ha! Ha! Alright, now we're into the middle of the pack, and the random number generator actually selected for us GamePro.de's review. But despite taking 7 years of German classes, having a German grandmother who teaches German in high school, and visiting Germany multiple times, I can't understand any. I can't read any German except for the word beer. So we've had to, once again, switch gears and reselect using the RNG machine. What we landed on is trustedreviews.com. So Gemma Ryles wrote the review for TR and scored it a 4 out of 5. Bayonetta 3 is the third installment of the series, featuring new playable characters and a wide array of beautifully designed monsters. The ability to control demon slays is endlessly fun, and running around as Bayonetta feels very fulfilling. While this game does have its flaws, I think it's a hack and slash that almost anyone can play. Bit of a long pull quote there, Metacritic. It's almost everything you need to read all in one place, and that's for a very specific reason. Trusted Reviews is a sort of catch-all review site, an SEO-driven review site that will review basically anything electronic, anything at all. You know, TVs, phones, laptops, vacuum cleaners, like anything that people might be searching for that is vaguely technologically related. Trusted Reviews will try to review it, because what they're trying to do is establish themselves as experts in a wide array of fields. Because what happens is Google then uses experts to provide higher ranked links for items. So if you were to search, let's say, should I buy Bayonetta? Theoretically, Trusted Reviews would show up higher. It doesn't. I checked, but ideally for them, it would show up higher. Now, the thing about these sorts of these sites is that they use they're driving at a specific type of format, and so they always use essentially the same construction around their reviews. And so, like, there's basically a formula that they're following because it simplifies their need to the way that they optimize their search engine optimization, their SEO. So it can sort of read a little repetitive, and it can also be a little clinical. It's not necessarily as emotive as some other reviews, and that's definitely evidenced here. I think it's still a well-written review. It's just you see the same sorts of thoughts repeated a couple of times, and that's just the nature of how reviews work on these types of sites. There's not much you can do about it. I didn't pick this on purpose. Like I said, the RNG monster picked it for us, but yeah. Anyway, my highlight was my main issue overall was the camera, in a similar vein to Pokemon Legends Arceus. Arceus? I don't know how to say that. That's not from the. I just don't know how to say Pokemon Legends Arceus. I'm going with Arceus, right? It seemed anyway. My main issue overall was the camera, in a similar vein to Pokemon Legends Arceus. It seemed to have a mind of its own and could frantically swivel during boss battles or fights, making the experience feel a little less polished. Which is fair enough. Like, cameras in third-person games are evidently an absolute nightmare and really hard to get right. Lots of games do as much as they can to try to give you the tools to make it feel right. It's pretty common these days to see a game give you, like, you jump into the options and it will allow you to select from a bunch of different, you know, do you want the camera to always follow you, or switch between enemies, or switch between immediate threats and things like that, which is good, but then when it doesn't work, it can be frustrating. But if they gave you the option via the settings, then it's on you, right? It sort of empowers the player a little bit more. I don't know if Bayonetta has those options. Like I said, I haven't played it, I'm not gonna. But it's interesting to see it highlighted here. Lower down, we see the should you buy it section, which tells us why you should or shouldn't buy it. I think this is a great idea. You know, I think it's a really interesting idea to specifically attempt to picture a reason why someone wouldn't buy a game, especially if it's one that you really enjoyed. And they gave it a 4 out of 5, so I think they really enjoyed it. So you've got to sort of put yourself in those shoes. Why wouldn't I want, like, what is it that I don't like about Bayonetta 3? Or what would force me to rethink purchasing Bayonetta 3? If you don't have a Switch, or in their case, they highlighted that the action might be too frantic. Obviously, why you should buy it is pretty simple, and the bulk of the text of the review already detailed that, but nevertheless, one thing that this particular format does is sort of render obsolete the idea of a conclusion paragraph or a score, because, you know, should you buy it, sort of wraps that up all on its own, doesn't it? But like I said, this is a SEO-driven website, and they're constructed in a way that they do certain things because it helps their site ranking on Google, or their page ranking on Google, not because, you know, logic says they no longer need a score or anything like that. Yeah. Also, real pedantic here. But right at the end, in the how we test section, we play every game we review through to the end. Outside of certain exceptions, we're getting 100% completion, like Skyrim, is close to impossible to do. When we don't fully finish a game before reviewing it, we will always alert the reader. Playing a game through to the end isn't the same as getting 100% completion, and in this review, Ryles implies they didn't get 100% completion, that there were elements that they didn't pursue. Also, you can main pass Skyrim without doing all the other things in about 30 hours. This is not, under any circumstance, a criticism of Ryles' review, but I do think this section does more harm than good in serving its readers, because it's not clear. It needs to be fixed for clarity, in my opinion. Anyway, PC Mag had our second grab from the middle of the pack, where Jordan Miner wrote for them a 4.5 out of 5 review. It translated onto Metacritic as a 90. Featuring giant demon battles, massive destruction, and flexible combat that encourages creative fighting, the long-awaited Bayonetta 3 is the Witcher's biggest action romp yet. This review might be the most positive review out of everything in this review. It's very close to being more positive than Destructoid. It might actually be more. It's definitely more positive than The Guardians, 5 out of 5. Yeah, it's interesting. The only drawback that Miner noted was they weren't a fan of the homunculi. They may have even, I can't be certain, I won't go into why, I haven't played the game, but I think there might be minor spoilers. That's not a pun on their last name either. I think there might be minor spoilers surrounding the homunculi there. Anyway, here's a grab that caught my eye. Despite the many systems to track, I never became overwhelmed. The mechanics make sense and flow into each other. Unlike Doom Eternal, Bayonetta 3's extra complications enrich the experience instead of spoiling the previous purity. Now, I'm inferring from this that Jordan didn't think Doom Eternal was an improvement over Doom 2016, which is a point of view I deeply disagree with, but reviews are opinions, right? And we don't need to agree with all of someone's opinions at all times, right? More importantly, what this does, by referencing another game that's vaguely similar, what they're doing is they're actually giving the reader a touch point, right? I know that I think Doom Eternal is a vast improvement on Doom 2016, right? So what I have there is the knowledge that my opinion and miners might not line up on actually some pretty key stuff, right? Like, they feel that by saying that, you know, the mechanics make sense and flow into each other and never overwhelm the player, right? I might feel that it winds up being too simplistic, right? Or that it could be more complex. It could involve more complexity. I think it's a really good move. That said, Doom Eternal is way better than Doom 2016. You crazy, miner. One appropriately ridiculous set piece features Bayonetta riding a demon across collapsing train tracks and twisting skyscrapers. It was like a scene from Inception, and it culminated in a climactic QuickTime event and cheeky one-liner from Bayonetta. This is, I suppose, how The Guardian arrived at its horny anime Nolan take. I think it highlights how reading more than one review can help you form a more complete picture of the game itself. The next sentence, directly after it, is a doozy too. A later boss battle, for reasons I won't spoil, gave me Choaniki vibes. All of Bayonetta gives me Choaniki vibes, so this sentence is particularly illuminating to me. There must be a dong-tastic boss fight in Bayonetta 3 for Jordan to make this claim. Like I said, I think this is a glowing review. If anything, I am surprised that it sits at a 9. I think it reads like a higher than a 9. I'm glad they had so much fun with the game. That's awesome. Alright, and finally we come to the lowest scores on Metacritic. They were two of the same, both 70s. I didn't need a RNG system to pick these two. I just went from top to bottom because there were only two of them. So that's pretty easy. So let's have a squiz. Starting off with GamesRadar. Oscar Taylor Kent wrote for GamesRadar, and they gave the game a 3.5 out of 5. When the witch takes charge, this demonic fighter is better than ever. After 8 long years, Platinum Games has delivered a sequel which successfully celebrates the series, although it does have problems with pacing and a split focus. I think immediately we get a feel for what Taylor Kent didn't like about Bayonetta 3, the parts that don't involve Bayonetta, right? Which I think makes sense. It's called Bayonetta 3. Yeah? Sonic 3 and Knuckles already gave us a quick and easy way to set expectations along these lines, right? If you're adding an extra playable character who isn't the titular, the eponymous character, yeah, I think maybe OTK would have enjoyed the game a bit more if it was Bayonetta 3 and Viola or something like that. I don't know. There's, you know, it's highly reductive, but that's what that grab immediately implies to me. We're living in a post-Devil May Cry 5 world now, where almost every level there is a blast to wall up and battle through, and doing so here often left me groaning about having to actually reach the fun bits. This sentence actually lasers in on OTK's other key complaint and frames it cleverly against another best-in-class game in the genre. How a person feels about DMC5 will give them a good context for how Bayonetta 3 will play. In OTK's case, they felt that replayability is critical to their enjoyment of the game. I think this was a really fair review. I think it was really well done, and ultimately it panned out almost exactly as it read, as a 3.5. The last cab off the rank is Luke Hinton's Bayonetta 3 review for Gfinity. They gave it a 70 according to Metacritic. By Gfinity scale, rather, it's simply a 7 out of 10. Bayonetta 3 may not reinvent the wheel, but its lightning-fast action and engaging gameplay push the Switch to its limits. This is a really interesting review because it appears to be done by someone with no connection at all to the series. A lot of the other reviews talk about, if they don't directly mention nostalgia, they do talk about it in a nostalgic way. They have a great love for the series, and they had great expectations. This cuts both ways. With no previous connection to a series, you can, first of all, have no preconceived notions of what the game should be, but also you might not have the greatest foundation for understanding what you're getting into. Hinton talks about how the game is an initiation by fire and called the beginning disorienting. So I think they might actually have fallen more on the side of someone who didn't have the foundation to play the game fully. But that is actually Bayonetta's fault, right? The knee-jerk response to this would be that someone unfamiliar with the series should go back and play the other games. But that's specious reasoning. That doesn't pan out at all. Other reviews claim the game doesn't need players to go back to earlier entries. And other amazing games also didn't require players to go back to earlier entries. Devil May Cry, as you know, we just mentioned, and The Witcher are two great examples of games you can sort of just jump straight into and not have to worry about returning to the rest of the game's catalog. More importantly, games shouldn't just be reviewed by fans of a series. Fans will always have a dramatically different perspective to newcomers, and if you expect the series to grow, then you need newcomers. It's always odd to me when fans get upset about lower scores from new people to a series, because if you're a fan, surely you want more people to enjoy the series, as many people as possible to enjoy the series. So the idea that it should only be reviewed by other fans is actually kind of limiting. You're boxing the series in. You should want almost exclusively newcomers to review it. If you think it is as good as you claim, then yeah, exclusively newcomers to see it stand up to the test of someone with no attachment. Anyway, here's another particularly enlightening sentence. You won't be blown away by the graphics, but stick it on a nice TV and Bayonetta 3 will look adequate enough. Hinton uses Bayonetta as a platform to talk about the Nintendo Switch's aging hardware, and I think it's a valid complaint. With a 4090 rather, out in the wild, costing as much, to be fair, as 7 Nintendo Switches, but delivering 4K at 120 frames, I think it's fair to talk about the visuals of a game on an aging platform. Adequate enough is also fine. It's not like they said it looks shitty. They said that the frame rate is fantastic the entire time, even in handheld mode. And obviously they like the art design. Art design does a lot to make up for old-looking graphics. So yeah, adequate enough is adequate enough, in my opinion. I think uncharitable types will probably try to point to the criticism of graphics as the reason for Bayonetta's low score. Right? That Gfinity esports.com might be more, I don't know, PC focused or something like that. It just doesn't really pan out. I think Hinton does a good job of justifying their opinion well beyond just the graphics, as they opened with, you know, as a newcomer to the series, they felt that the game was a little overwhelming, a little difficult to handle at times, especially early on. And yeah, I think that it's important. It's important to highlight that kind of thing. And, you know, it's not like graphics and the game being overwhelming the only things talked about. Hinton, Luke Hinton, and Tom Regan from The Guardian's 5-star review both describe Bayonetta 3's overall story as like bordering on incoherent. Right, so it's not like the criticisms end there. There are enough criticism, I think, to justify a 7 out of 10 score. Maybe even arguably a lower one, but I don't know Gfinity's scoring system. My gut would probably label this with a 6.5, but I probably wouldn't go as low as a 6. I don't know. But that's a 20-point scale. 20-point scales are ridiculous. 10-point scales are ridiculous. 5-point scales are ridiculous. 100-point scales are absolutely ridiculous. All scores are on some level ridiculous, but they're a necessity. We're operating in a world where scores exist, and so, railing against them does less than trying to get to the bottom of how people arrive at these things. I think 7's a good score for this review. It applies well. I think Hinton did a good job. If I had a fault with this review, I think it suffers a little bit from what I think of as the Grammarly effect. I don't know if you've used Grammarly to fix up your to check for typos and things, but Grammarly has a real deep desire to never use the same word more than twice. And if you use it more than twice, it'll suggest you use something different at every single possible point. It also adds commas. I didn't notice too many commas in this, but there are a couple of words that I felt were perhaps not as appropriate as others. Didn't fit as well as others, and I chalk it up to the Grammarly effect, but that's not really a criticism of the content of this review, more just the presentation of it, right? The graphics, if you will, eh? But yeah, overall, I think, it's been an interesting bunch of reviews, 6 different reviews across the breadth of the scale on Metacritic. Reviewing reviews, a weird idea. I actually enjoyed it. I read a lot of reviews anyway because I love video game criticism. So I enjoyed doing this. I enjoyed sort of making notes about certain aspects of reviews and stuff, and noting the writers and comparing my own feelings against what they'd written, against the text at hand. I don't know. Yeah, that's the review of the reviews of Bayonetta 3. Thanks for watching. That's all I've got.